Nottingham Forest are ready to make a club record offer for the Wolves forward Matheus Cunha. Arsenal are looking into the possibility of signing RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko this month. Manchester United and Napoli remain apart in their valuation of Alejandro Garnacho following a second round of talks. And Kyle Walker is ready to fly to Italy to complete a loan move to Milan. Hi, good evening. Welcome along to the Transfer Show. So much going on in this window. You've already seen Dharmesh and James Green, if you were with us at 5. Tim Sherwood thought he got away, but we've dragged him in. Great to see you, Tim. Thanks very much for joining us. Much more from Tim on the way. And much more from us. Marcus Rashford was all smiles at Manchester United training today as his representatives continue to talk to clubs about a potential move this month. And United's director of negotiations has left Milan with Lecce indicating their preference is not to sell Patrick Dorgu. We'll bring you the very latest. We're going to start with Matheus Cunha. James, what's the latest on his potential move?
Yeah, the latest is Nottingham Forest have come in for the player and are willing to break their club record to try and sign the Brazilian international in this window. 25 years old, scored 10 times in the Premier League already this season. And he's a bit of a big game player. All the 4 games that Wolves have won in the Premier League this season, this man's scored in them. Even though Wolves have been struggling, he's certainly shining through. Now, we know he's got a contract until 2027 and a new contract's on the table, but he hasn't yet signed. And Forest are joining a number of other clubs interested in his services in this window. We reported yesterday Arsenal are monitoring the situation, but at the moment it's Nottingham Forest showing big ambition and showing potentially what their future might look like, that this season isn't just a one-season wonder and they want to push on and kick on. But look, it's an interesting situation. It got even more interesting on Monday night after the game, Wolves' game with Chelsea, when Vitor Pereira came out and actually criticised the striker for his body language on the pitch. Now, we understand the Brazilian unhappy with that and that criticism. He's a passionate player, someone who's a bit of a winner, and he's probably just a bit frustrated to lose in the game. But lots of interest in this player, and Forest, one of those clubs showing huge ambition. Yeah, Tim, what do you think? James has just said Nottingham Forest interested, Arsenal interested. If you're Matheus Cunha, where do you go?
Arsenal. I mean, if we're talking about those two sides, there's only one decision he needs to make, and that's to go to Arsenal, play in the Champions League and challenge for the Premier League title, albeit Nottingham Forest have had an amazing season. I think it's a bit early to start putting them in the same bracket as Arsenal. I like this kid, I really do. I think he's capable of playing at any top 4 side, and I really mean that, in and around him. He's doing well in a side what are struggling in the Premier League. Imagine him in a very good side. Didn't like his antics on the pitch against Ipswich. You know, it put me off him a little bit, but I can't take away from the fact that he's a very talented footballer.
Is that someone with his head turned, behaving like that?
I'm not sure. I mean, that was probably six weeks ago, was it? You know, he's already served the ban and come back. Might have been a month ago. It was unsavoury. I didn't like it. Put me off him a little bit, but I certainly. I've forgiven him and I put him back in my fantasy side. This is a top guy. This is a top draw player.
Would he fit the way Arsenal play?
I think he would, because they need someone from different areas who are going to score goals. You know, if they can't find that number 9, they obviously it's glaringly obvious they need the 9. If they can't find that, I think someone who scores, obviously got 10 goals from midfield, you know, and he's not stopped yet. You know, he looks like he scores different types of goals as well. He arrives, good anticipation into the box, scores a spectacular as well, and also assists. You can't take it away from him. Very talented footballer, and for me, it'd be a very good fit at Arsenal.
Tim likes Cunha, Dharmesh at Arsenal. Are they looking at anybody else?
Yeah, look, internal talks are continuing at Arsenal about whether a deal is possible for any forward in this transfer window. There's a long-term interest in the RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko. We've heard this name being bandied around with Arsenal before. Discussions ongoing whether a deal can get done in January and early February. Look, Sesko actually signed a new contract, a long-term one with RB Leipzig until 2029. And his agent told Sky Sports News earlier on this month that he expects him to stay at Leipzig. Leipzig, for their part, they don't want him to go anywhere. Yes, they have been eliminated very early from the Champions League. They've lost their 6 games out of 6. They're in action now. He's actually started for RB Leipzig tonight against Sporting. But having said that, there is still that possibility that if a big enough offer was to come in, would RB Leipzig's head be turned? However, the other reason they don't want to lose him in this transfer window is because they're only a point off the top 4 in the Bundesliga. They would need someone like Sesko to be able to spearhead a challenge to get back into the Champions League next season. Look, interesting, Leipzig are understood to have a gentleman's agreement with Sesko that if the right offer was to come in the summer, then they would allow him to go. But apparently he's got no release clause, so that's what makes it very, very difficult to do a deal in January. Because if you're RB Leipzig, you're under no pressure to sell him. And if someone comes in for him, you can charge anything that you want for a player like Sesko. Just a reminder, though, of what Sesko's agent, a man by the name of Elvis Bosanovic, told Sky Sports News. He said, we're aware of interest from several top clubs for a long time. If you ask me if Sesko will move in January, I can only say Sesko is happy with his development in RB Leipzig at the moment, and he is an RB Leipzig player with a long-term contract.
What sort of money are we talking about?
Well, we've heard that before.
What are we talking about?
Probably about 60, 65 million at least.
Well, they'll be able to charge what they want at the moment. If, just say, for example, a club went in with a bid in January, particularly, you'll have been there in a January transfer window. If you're trying to buy a player or sell a player, there's a perceived desperation from a buying club if they're going into business, especially with a striker in a January transfer window. If you're at a club who's about to sell a player in a January transfer window, you can almost tell that buying club, well, we're going to raise the price here. Have you experienced that when in your managerial career, in a January transfer window?
Well, no, in a January transfer window, I remember I was at Tottenham and the last thing I needed was more players. You know, we were playing 13-a-side out there on the training pitch. It was always, unless I was going to get offered the line of Messi or Ronaldo, which wasn't coming in the door. So I'd rather not bring in and block up the pathway for the academy kids. And that's what I always look at. You know, when you're at a club like Tottenham, you should be producing kids through your academy. A club like Arsenal as well. Last thing you want to do is block up the pathway for them very talented kids. I'm not sure about this kid. I'm really not. I think he's a huge risk, especially at that money, and especially he's never played in the Premier League before. He might come over and be a sensation. For me, I would go for a player who's almost a sure thing. There's no such thing as that. I would go for a Liam Delap over him all day long, because he's a very young man. I know he's a young boy as well, but he knows the Premier League. He's done very, very well, and I think with better players around him, I'm not trying to sell Ipswich's players, sorry Ipswich fans, but that is what I would be going for. I think he's an absolute no-brainer over Sesko.
I'm glad you mentioned Spurs, Tim, there. Let's talk Spurs. When you hear someone say Tottenham Hotspur at the moment, what do you think?
It's been disappointing, we know that, but they're still in everything. You know, they're not gonna. It's going to be difficult to finish in the top 4. And obviously, if you're a manager of Tottenham, the objective at the beginning of every season is to finish in the Champions League spot, 4th or 5th, because it looks like it's going to go to the 5th place. If you can't achieve that, then it's Europa League. They look like they're going to struggle to do that. They're still in the Carabao Cup. We know they take a lead to Anfield. It's going to be very difficult. We see how Liverpool on all fronts, you know, and the squad of players, what they have, the quality, it's going to be very difficult at Anfield, but they're still in it. They're still in the FA Cup as well. And Europa League, I think, if they can get their players back to fitness, I think they can beat anyone. We know Tottenham can beat anyone on their day, but they can also lose to anyone. They need to stop the bleeding at the moment. You know, they're hemorrhaging and they need to stop that, and hopefully they can do that on Sunday against Leicester at home. If you don't beat Leicester at home, it's serious problems.
Exactly. People will start saying relegation, won't
they?
Do they need to strengthen? Do they need to get players in this window?
Oh, they need to if they can, you know. But like I say, the last thing you want to do is bring someone in who shouldn't be anywhere near a Tottenham shirt in the long run, just for the sake of a body. If you can get a loan signing in, then everyone's open to that. You know, you're not going to commit yourself to a long-term deal with huge money. Have a look what's in the academy. Is there anything you can bring forward? The trouble is, centre-backs is where they're struggling at the moment. You go and bring a centre-back in, and the end of the month, middle of February, they're all fit. Mickey van der Ven's back fit, Romero's back fit. What do you do with a new signing? He will be aware of that. If I'm a player, I'm a centre-back coming into Tottenham, I know I'm there until them two are fit. They're going to be the first choice. Unless you can get someone who's better than them two. But in January, very difficult to find.
You've been a manager. Ruben Amorim. He criticised his team. He called them the worst team in the club's history.
Yeah.
And now he's backtracked a bit today. What do you make of the fact that he said that in front of the world the other day?
Yeah, it was disappointing, and I was surprised because when you talk to the media, you also send the message out to the directors. Not sure how they would have took that. Certainly the fans, they would have been disappointed with it, but it's probably why he said it was because of the fans. He wants to let them know that it's not going to be easy, this is very difficult. But you also send a message out to your dressing room. So the ones you need on your side at the moment are the players. Yeah. They're the ones who are out there on the field fighting for the club and trying to get as many points as they possibly can. Some would argue you're not doing that very well at the moment, and I would agree. I'm surprised how poorly he's done. I really am. I felt, having looked at his sporting sides, that he would have done a lot better. He seems to be very stubborn, sticking to his principles, and there seems to be this stigma around you're not allowed to change. You know, if you change from your philosophy, then you're a bad manager. You go against it. It's a load of nonsense. Some of the best managers we've seen change. They change in game.
Tim, sorry
Unai Emery's the best one.
There, but don't you think United employed him because of what he was doing at Sporting?
Yeah.
Now, he's done his whole career playing three at the back.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it have shown a sign of weakness on his side if, for short-term results, he thought, right, these players are not used to three at the back, I'm going to play four at the back. It's almost like he's auditioning the players to see who's going to be with him and who's not, almost, isn't it?
I don't think that Man United and the hierarchy there are bothered how he plays. All they're interested in is winning and entertaining. You could say the same about Ange Postecoglou. Why is he at Tottenham? He's there because he does something different. Done it at Celtic, done it in Japan, and he's sticking to his principles. But sometimes, I'm not saying you change it, all ends up and wholesale changes, but sometimes you might have to just tweak, certainly if you get injuries to key players. And I think he's sticking to it. It's too stubborn, in my opinion. And I think in the end, what you end up doing, like Russell Martin did at Southampton, you end up sticking to your principles and losing your job.
Yeah. Maybe like Ange Postecoglou as well.
Well, Ange, I wouldn't get rid of Ange. I think who's going to come in? I mean, Tottenham have tried so many managers. You know, tried Nuno, who's joint second in the Premier League. They've been Jose Mourinho, who's second with Fenerbahce, and Antonio Conte, who's winning in Napoli in Italy. So they've had their managers. The managers are not bad. They're not bad managers. They just need a little bit of time. And I think given time and a little bit more strength in depth, I think Ange will get it right at Tottenham. I really believe that.
Listen, we're going to talk more about Spurs and more about Manchester United's transfer business in a minute. But, Tim, I've got to ask you about another one of your former clubs, Villa. Talk that John Duran might be going out the door. Would you let him go? No,
not at the moment. I think they need options. Their in-house competition is fantastic, and I think him and Ollie Watkins are pushing each other along. Not for the money. If you're going to take him now, you're going to have to pay over the odds, and I think over the odds is 100 million. I really are. 57 million is probably correct. I think it's probably correct amount, but Aston Villa, you don't need to sell. And why would he want to leave Aston Villa to go to West Ham? It makes no sense to me.
Do you think something needs to be revisited in the summer, though? Because it's clear it's Ollie Watkins or John Duran, because he's playing one or the other. And come the summer, everyone is going to have to reassess whether they think they're getting enough first-team football or not. So everyone's saying, like John Duran, do you think maybe, and I might be talking out of turn here, maybe at 29 years old, Ollie Watkins might be the player that they consider, well, we can move him on and then allow John Duran to progress?
Possibly, but how much you're going to get for a 29-year-old and how much you're going to get? Because if they're going to get rid of one of them, if they're going to make that decision that they can only work with one, Unai Emery wants two of them. Any manager would want two, because if something happens, it's suspension. Duran just had a suspension. Ollie Watkins has picked up a few injuries. You know, Ollie knows what it's like to play second fiddle to someone. He's done that with England with Harry Kane. So he knows how John Duran's feeling about it. And I think it's healthy to have in-house competition. That all depends whether Aston Villa need to raise funds. I would suggest they don't. I think they've got 2 billionaire owners there who want to spend money. And I think Unai Emery is clever enough to juggle the pack without getting rid of his 2 number 9s.
Tim, it's been brilliant that you've stepped in and appreciated that. Tim's part of the soccer special tonight. Great lineup for you. Danny Mills, Sue Smith, Gary Rowett and Mark Wilson. And Tim heading the lineup. He told me to say that. Tim, thanks very much. Yeah, so much going on. We are going to go live to Paris next. Manchester City preparing to face PSG in that crucial Champions League match. The champions of France and the champions of England both struggling. We are live in Paris next. Hello again. Just before the break, we were talking about Benjamin Sesko, who we understand Arsenal are interested in. I can tell you he's playing at the moment for RB Leipzig against Sporting, and he has scored. RB Leipzig winning in that one, and Benjamin Sesko has scored a goal. Right, let's head to Paris. Manchester City are in Champions League action. They've placed PSG. It's absolutely crucial for both sides. Keith Downey is at the Parc des Princes for us. Keith, hello again. Right, Manchester City have got a couple new signings, but we won't see them tonight. Why?
Yeah, the two players that they brought in, Mike, over the last 24 hours, Victor Reich, the Palmeiras defender, and Abdu Kuzanov, neither of those players eligible to play in the Champions League tonight, despite the fact that we caught a glimpse of both of them training yesterday in Manchester. In fact, they were the only two defenders out of Pep Guardiola's selection that were part of that training session. Perhaps Guardiola was just trying to keep players' cards close to his chest, up against his old teammate Luis Enrique, the PSG manager. Of course, they both played together at Barcelona. Perhaps he was just trying to keep things quiet ahead of tonight's clash, which is a big one. They're close to bringing in a third signing in the shape of Omar Marmoush, the Eintracht Frankfurt striker. He was having his medical in the UK yesterday, but that one is yet to be announced. Even if it had been done, like the two defenders, he would be ineligible tonight. So it'll be the usual contingent for Manchester City tonight as they try and put some points on the board in the Champions League, because it's been a pretty poor start to I was going to say the group phase, but the competition for them. And they really need to get, I would say, at least 4 points from the remaining two games to ensure that their Champions League dream this season stays alive.
Yeah, Keith, let's expand on that. What exactly is on the line this evening?
Yeah, loads on the line. I mean, you look at the two sides, Mike, that are playing tonight, PSG and Manchester City. Of course, rich in history. Manchester City won the competition just 2 years ago, and I don't think anyone could have predicted at the outset this season that the two of them would be struggling towards the bottom of that 36-team table, and with the prospect of potential elimination. But just looking at the table, Man City in 24th spot, PSG in 26th. City out of the danger zone by goal difference. For PSG, well, they are below the line right now, and that says that they really need to pick up points in these next two games to ensure survival and that they remain in the next phase of the Champions League. But as I sort of touched on earlier, I think 4 points would be enough for both sides to see them through to a playoff spot. They will both fancy their chances in their very last game, so a point tonight might not be too bad for the respective managers. But I think both of them are looking at the matches they've played so far and kicking themselves a little bit. Pep Guardiola admitted that yesterday. Defeats to Sporting Lisbon and Juventus have cost them, and of course that draw against Feyenoord when they were 3-0 up and of course surrendered the lead and drew 3-3. So they've kicked themselves in the foot a little bit so far, but a win tonight, I think, here in Paris against PSG will prove to many that Manchester City are back. We've seen them doing better in the league over the last number of weeks. They're 6 unbeaten, and of course they won 6-0 at the weekend against Ipswich. But I think a win here in Paris tonight just would underline that they're getting back to their best, and they've still got a chance of putting in a challenge in this Champions League this season. So huge match. Two old friends in the technical areas, two teams, large teams, looking for points on the board, doing battle here in, as you can see, a very rainy Paris tonight as Manchester City play PSG, both clubs looking to keep their Champions League dream alive.
Keith, il pleut. Thank you very much, live from Parc des Princes. Right, Arsenal face Dinamo Zagreb tonight. Now, a win will all but guarantee them a place in the top 8 of the Champions League standings. Gary Cottrell is at the Emirates for us. Hello again, Gary. Right, there's been lots of talk about Arsenal needing a striker. Do you hear anything about them getting someone in before deadline day?
Well, yeah, that latest name, Benjamin Sesko, as Darmesh alluded to earlier in the programme, is a credible link. Arsenal are interested, but as he said, it's a difficult one to do, particularly this window. He's just the latest of striker names linked with Arsenal this window, isn't he? Everyone knows that Arsenal want a striker, need a striker. Mikel Arteta was joking about it in his news conference yesterday. He says he's excited by the transfer window, but he can't really follow all the speculation of strikers' names. But he says he regularly gets calls and texts from friends and family saying, oh, you're signing him, or what about this player, or is this player coming? He's certainly getting texts and calls with the ownership. He says he's in constant communication with the American ownership about what's going to happen, if anything, in this window. They've told him that he will get the financial backing if the right fit can be found, and that's the question, isn't it? It's got to be the right fit. Just 1 second, Mike. Listen to this. That is the music that was blasting out of the training ground yesterday as the players warmed up for this match. It's the latest in these things that Mikel Arteta does, just to boost morale and boost spirits. You'll recognise it. It's Maski Nada. Stands for, when you translate it, more than anything. And what Arsenal fans want, more than anything, is a striker.
Gary, I wish you were here because all sorts of hips were swaying when you put that on. Gary Cottrell, live from the Emirates. Thank you very much. Gary Cottrell. Now, Celtic face Young Boys tonight, knowing a win will almost certainly be enough to secure a spot in the knockout phase. Luke Shanley is there for us. Now, Luke, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd bet on Celtic tonight. They can't possibly not do anything but win, surely.
Now, you said that last week when it was Dundee against Celtic. You were going to put your money on Celtic and it was a cracking 3-3 draw. So I don't know how much money you waste on the old gambling, but I think you need to be more responsible, Mike. Come on, it's the Champions League. You never know. But yeah, absolutely. Celtic will be the favourites for this one. There'll be an expectation. And given that they've progressed through this tournament so far, you can see that progression in Europe, then I think Brendan Rodgers will be confident, but he won't be complacent going into this one. And I mentioned that Dundee game, and the reason I did was because they were a bit soft at the back on that occasion, and I think Brendan Rodgers admitted that after the game. He knows they have to be better. And in a game in the Champions League, you know, Young Boys last season were excellent. They won the Swiss League by 12 points. They were very convincing. Yes, they are struggling just now, but they're eliminated from the tournament, but they'll want something to hang their hat on for the rest of their domestic season. They currently sit 9th in the Swiss League, so they will want to try and get something out of this one. But for Celtic, they know a win will all but secure a playoff place for them. And given they will have an eye on Arsenal against Dynamo Zagreb, also PSG, Manchester City, teams in and around about them. Remember, Celtic's last game of the league phase is away at Villa Park next week. I don't think they'll want it to come down to that one. They will want to try and get the job done tonight, or at least most of the job done, if they can win. They've already had good wins at home against the likes of Slovan Bratislava and RB Leipzig. They did draw against Club Brugge as well. It will be a big one at Celtic Park tonight.
Luke, I feel suitably admonished. While you were talking, I was facing the wall in the corner. Thank you very much. Enjoy your night. Luke Shanley at Celtic Park. Fantastic night of Champions League action in store. We've got the goals at 11 o'clock this evening, right here on Sky Sports News. Manchester City, Arsenal, Celtic, and more. Be a great night. So much transfers to be talked about. When we come back from the break, we're going to cover all of them, including the latest from Manchester United. See you in a moment. Hello again. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Welcome back, Dharmesh and James. Now, Ruben Amorim, that's the bloke. He was in front of the media today, and he's going to talk transfers. What did he have to say? Here he is.
Ruben, you've been honest, as always, about the sort of financial realities that the club are going to face this year. There's a lot of talk of Napoli and Chelsea interest in Garnacho. If the club was to get to a point where it gets an offer that it deems acceptable for a player like that, how important is it for you that you are then able to reinvest and use that money?
Guys, I understand the question. Let's focus on the game. I don't want to talk about that, especially before a game. Our focus is that our players are here to play. We need to improve. We need to win games. To have that feeling of winning is really important for us. So let's focus on that.
Ruben Amorim telling us absolutely nothing. So, Dharmesh, you tell us something about Alejandro Garnacho.
Yeah, look, Napoli are still pushing to sign the Manchester United forward, Alejandro Garnacho. He was training, though, as usual, ahead of that game in the Europa League tomorrow night. And what a big game it is, Manchester United against Rangers at Old Trafford. But it's understood that a gap in valuation still exists between what Napoli are prepared to pay and what Manchester United would want. Sky Italy are reporting that Manchester United might have actually lowered their demands for Alejandro Garnacho. We think that Napoli want to pay around £46.5 million. United have reduced their valuation, if you like, to around £55 million. So there's still a bit of a gap, but there's an understanding now that maybe Napoli are growing in optimism that there can be a compromise found between what they're prepared to pay at 46.5 and United's £55 million valuation. It is being driven, though, by Antonio Conte, this deal. He desperately wants to bring in Alejandro Garnacho in this transfer window. Garnacho himself, not looking to leave Manchester United, but now that he's hearing that if the right deal was to come along, Manchester United would listen to offers, it's clear that he's going to have to assess his options. And Napoli is clearly one of those options. Chelsea are also interested in Garnacho. We don't think there's been a formal approach to Manchester United on that. Maybe just keeping an eye on the situation with Napoli before they make their move, if they're going to make their move at all. But Sky Italy are also reporting that Napoli are interested in the Borussia Dortmund forward Karim Adeyemi as well. And I just wonder whether that's instead of Garnacho, whether it's trying to nudge Manchester United into doing it more on Napoli's terms, or indeed whether, yes, we actually do want to sign Adeyemi. We see him as a better option than Garnacho.
So, James, sorry to interrupt, but are you surprised that Manchester United aren't thinking about building a team around one of their young stars who could take them forward? Or the fact that they're thinking, no, we'll actually sell him, we'll get a few quid?
Yeah, I'm surprised. If you think about it, he was almost the saviour for Manchester United. He was supposed to be the future, so to speak. But his playing time's decreased. I think he started 4 Premier League games under Amorim compared to 7 under Ten Hag previously. And I think the interesting thing when we look at the financial aspects of these deals is what Manchester United player right now has added value to themselves and their figure. Now, that's so important. Now, Manchester United, we know their struggles. We know their struggles on the pitch this season. Players are not exactly shining right now. Their transfer value is not particularly increasing. But this one, despite not playing too much, his transfer value is still pretty high, and that's a substantial amount of money. But it does surprise me. I think he's full of talent. But
one thing you have to take into account here, though, with Garnacho, Ruben Amorim is playing with 3 central defenders and 2 wing-backs and 2 number 10s. He's your out-and-out winger with a back 4. Where does he actually fit into Ruben Amorim's system? Having said that, look, Ruben Amorim has been talking him up in recent weeks, and he did start against Arsenal in the FA Cup, against Southampton in the league. He didn't start the game against Brighton. It's going to be really interesting to see what the team sheet is tomorrow. We'll find out around about an hour to an hour and a quarter before the game kicks off. If Garnacho is not in that squad, what do we read into that?
Indeed.
Is it that he's close to leaving? Do they not want to risk Garnacho getting injured ahead of a move? Or he could surprise everyone and he could start?
Indeed. I bet Marcus Rashford doesn't start. What do we know about the developments in his future?
First of all, we should say that he was training, as usual, with the first-team squad. He hasn't been banished from the first-team squad at all. This is not a Jadon Sancho situation where there's a falling out with the manager. As far as we're aware, Ruben Amorim has not fallen out with Marcus Rashford. with that in mind, all options remain on the table with Rashford. He could still leave in this window. His preferred destination is Barcelona. But with that, Barcelona have got problems of their own. They need to create salary space to actually accommodate someone like Marcus Rashford.
They got enough time to do that?
Potentially, yeah. If they can offload the players like Eric Garcia and Ansu Fati, easier said than done, admittedly, then maybe they can create that salary space for Marcus Rashford to come in. AC Milan were the front runners earlier on in this transfer window. Their interest seems to have cooled. Borussia Dortmund as well were looking to do a deal with Marcus Rashford and Manchester United, but the finances are such that it's so problematic to do a deal for Marcus Rashford. United, they can look back to this time last year when they did a deal with Jadon Sancho to Borussia Dortmund. And they did a deal whereby, yes, initially they paid a substantial portion of his wages, but the deal was that if Jadon Sancho made a certain number of appearances, however he performed with goals, assists, but then also how far Borussia Dortmund got in the Bundesliga and in the Champions League, that would then reduce the percentage that United would pay in those wages. That was the agreement. And they got to the Champions League final. And in the end, I think Manchester United actually made more money than what they would have had to have paid if Jadon Sancho stayed at Manchester United. The other option, of course, is Marcus Rashford, come 11 p.m. on February the 3rd, is still a Manchester United player, in which case there might have to be a bit of reintegration into the first-team squad so that he is playing until the end of the season.
James, explain something to me. So finances, Darmas has just said, are going to be an issue because he gets paid so much. Barcelona, who can't afford a bean. How can that possibly work?
Yeah, again, I think Darmas says it pretty well, that as long as Barcelona can clear some space, that's going to be crucial, which, as you mentioned, is not very easy in this window. I think the signing of Marcus Rashford for a lot of clubs is becoming a little bit complicated. His wages are certainly an issue. I know you mentioned about AC Milan, they were interested, and we were talking about him last week, interest there. That seems to have cooled. Reason why, potentially because of the next player we're talking about is going to be Kyle Walker. But yeah, it really surprises me that Barcelona, but when he says, and when you hear, I want to play for Barcelona, I think it's difficult not to stand here and go, well, lots of people want to play for Barcelona.
Yeah.
And to be, I don't want to be disrespectful at all. It's a dream for many to play for a massive club like Barcelona. But he's got to maybe prove himself on the pitch a little bit more. And I wouldn't be so surprised to see him in the squad tomorrow. You never know. He's training as normal, as Darmas says. Still being in the shop window is really important for Manchester United. Teams around Europe need to see Marcus Rashford, see if he's still got that hunger and bite, because we know he's an incredibly talented footballer. So all options are on the table, and I genuinely won't be surprised to see him staying post-deadline.
I wonder if he's overestimated what the market was going to be like for him. If you've done that interview to say that you want a new challenge well before the transfer window opens, I'm sure he wasn't envisaging that on day 22 he'd still be training with Manchester United ahead of a game against Rangers, and at the moment no closer to getting a move away from United.
Yeah, good point. All right, let's talk about incomings at United. Any movement?
They want to do business. I think a lot of it is going to depend on who they can get out of the club in the remaining days. But it is clear that they do have an interest in the Lecce left wing-back Patrick Dorgu. Lecce have told Manchester United that they don't want to sell or allow him to leave in this transfer window, but that could just be a negotiating tool. Now, we have seen pictures from Sky in Italy, Gianluca Di Marzio sent these through, of United officials leaving a meeting with Lecce officials and Dorgu's representatives. The result of that meeting is that there is a gap in valuation between what Lecce want and what Manchester United are prepared to pay. United, we think, want to do a deal of around 35 million euros all in. Lecce, we think, want to do a deal 45 million euros all in. So 10 million euros gap. Could there be a compromise where they meet in the middle and get this deal done? Talks, we are told, are ongoing. So Manchester United must feel that they've been out there, they've had talks, and if the talks are ongoing, then maybe they think that there is a deal to be done here. Having said that, they are keeping an eye on other players as well. Crystal Palace's Tyrek Mitchell and Wolves' Riot El Nouri. I just wonder whether that's like real interest in these players, or maybe just a message to Lecce, hold on, we can move away unless you lower your demands for Dorgu.
You were talking about how Alejandro Garnacho doesn't fit into Manchester United. Well, the fact he's playing wing-backs and they seem so short in those areas, it feels like if it's not this player, Manchester United will get one in this window.
It is the most problematic area that Manchester United seem to have just now. Yes, they're having issues up front because they're not scoring enough goals. But you've got a problem with Tyrell Malacia, who was injured for the best part of 18 months, who they're considering loan offers for. Luke Shaw can't get fit. And you've got Diogo Dalot, who predominantly is a right-footed player, having to play on the left side. They need to fill that position.
And we need to go to a break. When we come back, though, all 20 clubs will be covered in the wrap with these two gentlemen. See you in a moment.
Welcome back to the Transfer Show. Now it's time to go around the club, starting with this man right here.
Thanks, James. Arsenal have held talks internally over recruiting a forward. RB Leipzig's Benjamin Sesko, who scored tonight, remains a player of interest. Discussions ongoing about whether a deal is possible this window.
Aston Villa Fenerbahce confirmed they have reached an agreement in principle with Aston Villa for the transfer of Diego Carlos. Shall I say the player will undergo a medical soon?
With less than 2 weeks of the window remaining, Bournemouth are in the market for a new forward.
Michael Kiyode is travelling to London for a medical with Brentford today. Brentford have agreed an initial loan with Fiorentina for the right-back, with a £13.5 million option to buy him in the summer. Meanwhile, Mikkel Damsgaard has signed a new deal with the club until 2030 with an option of a further year.
Brighton have recalled goalkeeper Carl Rushworth from his loan spell at Hull City. He's expected to stay with the Premier League club for the rest of the season.
Torino are close to securing a deal with Chelsea for Cesare Cazadei, but Lazio remain interested in the player and are actively trying to sign him. They're also in talks with the London club for Renato Vega.
Crystal Palace are on the lookout for a defender after Trevor Chalobah was recalled by Chelsea from his loan spell at Selhurst Park.
And David Moyes is looking for a striker to bring into Goodison Park in this window.
Fulham are interested in signing Emerson Royal from Milan. Galatasaray are also keen on the former Tottenham right-back.
Julio Enciso has completed his Ipswich medical ahead of his loan move from Brighton.
With just under 2 weeks left in the window, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Leicester are looking to bolster their squad as they look to avoid relegation.
Now, Liverpool's focus in this window is retaining their best players. Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate are all in contract extension discussions, with Alexander-Arnold, Salah and Van Dijk all free to discuss moves with foreign clubs.
Kyle Walker is ready to fly to Milan as soon as Manchester City and AC Milan agree terms on a loan deal.
Manchester United and Napoli are still apart in their valuation of Alejandro Garnacho following a second round of talks in Italy today. The Serie A leaders are maintaining an offer between 42 and 46.5 million, with United reducing their request from over 63 million to 55.
Newcastle and Atlanta are in advanced talks over the signing of winger Miguel Almiron. The deal will cost an initial £8 million plus £3 million in add-ons.
Nottingham Forest are ready to make a club record offer for Wolves forward Matheus Cunha.
Southampton value 18-year-old winger Tyler Dibbling at £55 million and don't want to sell in this window.
Ange Postecoglou says it is possible Tottenham do not sign anyone before the transfer window closes. Spurs are understood to be keen to sign a forward, but nothing has materialised yet.
West Ham have agreed a deal worth £13 million with OH Leuven for midfielder Ezekiel Banzuzi.
And Wolves are adamant forward Matheus Cunha is not for sale in this window, despite the interest of Nottingham Forest and Arsenal.
Not just the Premier League doing deals, there's news from the WSL as well. Chelsea have agreed a world record fee with San Diego Wave for Naomi Girma. Anton Tolui can tell us more.
She's been described as the best centre-back in the world. Naomi Girma is WSL bound with Chelsea. And top-tier talent costs top dollar. $1.1 million to be precise. That's £890,000, a new world record transfer fee. She's been Chelsea's top target all window. Chelsea unafraid to spend big in January when they signed Sam Kerr a few years ago. In free agency, they knew the impact she was going to make. They gave her a league-leading contract. And it was only this time last year they signed Myra Ramirez for a British record fee, potentially rising to a world record fee of around £425,000. It's now pretty much double that to get that kind of talent in now.
WSL is flying, isn't it? Right. James mentioned, I think it was you mentioned in the wrap, that we just heard from Ange Postecoglou. Tell us what he said.
Yes, interesting quotes ahead of their Europa League game tomorrow night. He was asked whether there was a chance the Spurs don't sign anyone more. They've already signed Antonin Kinski, the goalkeeper, who's actually started really well for them. But he says, yeah, it's potential that we don't sign any more. He said the club are working hard to get some help for the players. But he says, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing imminent. But in the last week of the window, anything can happen, and anything can happen quickly. Tottenham play Hoffenheim tomorrow. Just to add as well, a little note on Christian Romero, that he's returned to training, but he won't be ready for first-team action for another week or 10 days. So, at least for good news for Tottenham, potentially a player coming back in Christian Romero. Maybe bad news.
Not good news if they're not going to be buying anyone.
If they're not buying anyone, but
he's hedged his bets.
Look, he hedged his bets, as a lot of managers do in press conferences.
All right, well, we spoke about Tottenham in relation to Tyler Dibbling from Southampton, as well as RB Leipzig, but it's going to cost. Tell us how much it's going to cost a club to get an injured 18-year-old.
When you describe it like that, it sounds a lot of money. They won't accept any offers below £55 million for this player, but he's a young player, 18-year-old, oozes talent, and in a really disappointing season for Southampton, he has shone throughout, scored a couple of goals in the Premier League, couple of goals in the FA Cup a week or so ago as well. He's highly rated, and a lot of clubs are looking at him, the likes of Aston Villa, Chelsea, Tottenham, one of them, RB Leipzig, are monitoring. We understand that there are some clubs willing to reach around £40 million, but as I mentioned, Southampton value him more than £55 million, and that was the figure that Chelsea paid Southampton for Romeo Lavia recently. So look, Southampton want big money. They don't want to sell him. As you mentioned, he's injured for the next 6 weeks, so unlikely he'll move in this window. But not a surprise that big clubs are monitoring him after a terrific start to this season.
Right, I want to race through some more, boys, so nice and quick. Kyle Walker, has he played his last game for Manchester City, James?
Very likely, yes. Look, we understand he's very close to moving to AC Milan on loan with an option to buy. Sky in Italy actually reporting this deal is done for the player. However, sources in the UK are saying that's not the case just quite yet. But he's waiting for permission from Manchester City to travel to Milan to complete his medical and finalise the deal. Very soon, Kyle Walker will be an AC Milan player.
Garnacho, Ipswich doing a bit of business.
Yeah, another new signing on the way, it looks like. Julio Enciso has completed his Ipswich Town medical ahead of a straight loan from Brighton. All being well, there should be a formal announcement that that man there is an Ipswich Town player for the rest of the season.
OK, and what about West Ham? A line from them?
Yeah, this one has come from our senior reporter, Rob Dorset, who said that West Ham have agreed a deal with Belgian club OH Leuven to sign their midfielder Ezekiel Banzuzi. Now, the agreement's £10 million up front, £3 million in performance-related add-ons, and he's due to fly to England, according to Rob, for a medical in the next 24 hours.
Brentford. Quickly, a new signing potentially?
Mentioned it in the wrap. Michael Chiodi, a 20-year-old Italian right-back from Fiorentina, has travelled to Brentford for a medical, agreed an initial loan with a £13.5 million option to buy. Also in that wrap, if you heard, Mikkel Damsgaard signed a new contract till at least 2030. Club's got an option to extend it for another year. That, for Brentford fans, is very, very good news.
Yeah, lots going on. James Green, Dharma Chef, thank you very much for today. That is the transfer show for today. Coming up after us, a soccer special, an absolute bonus for you. We've got 3 British sides in Champions League action, and there's loads more football. Jules and the team are going to talk you through it all. Remember, the English champions are in Paris, taking on the French champions, and quite frankly, one of them could be quite a night. Enjoy.